What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're talking about this Sony feature that I think is not receiving nearly enough attention for what it's worth, and that is clear image zoom. The reason for me to look into this is because I own the Sigma 18 to 35mm 1.8 and I absolutely love this lens. But I often find that the zoom range feels a little bit limiting for me. I would like that 35mm to reach just a little bit further. And on my Sony FX30, the 18 to 35 is more like a 27 to 52, which is a nice range. Don't get me wrong, I'm very happy with that. But I would just like to be able to reach that little hair further. And that's when I was reminded that Sony cameras actually have a feature called clear image zoom that allows you to zoom into your footage in camera and essentially stay at the same resolution, so you're not losing any image quality. I can't even begin to imagine what the science is behind this in camera. If there's anyone who knows how this works, please let us know in the comments. I would love to know, and I'm sure there's many people watching this video who would also love to know, how does Sony actually do this? When you're recording in HD 1080p, you can zoom up to 2 times. And in 4K, you can zoom up to 1.5 times. This means that if I'm recording on my 18 to 35, I now have the equivalent, the full frame equivalent of a 27 to 75 in 4K and a 27 to 100 in HD. So if this feature actually works well and sticks to its promise of not reducing the image quality, I think this could be super practical for me. So I've done a bunch of tests and a bunch of different scenarios testing the HD and the 4K to see if it actually does meet its promise of not reducing the image quality. Let's find out. Okay, so first of all, let's test to see if there actually is any point in using clear image zoom in the first place. Why not just digitally zoom into your image in post-production? So for this first test, what I did was I shot at 23.3 millimeters. If you times that by 1.5, which is the clear image zoom rate, you get 35 millimeters. This means that I would be able to test the clear image zoom with the optical zoom of 35 millimeters and put them side by side to see if there was any difference. So in this first example, I've got this Lego Viking here. And on the left is the 23.3, which I have digitally zoomed in post-production. And on the right is the 23.3 with the clear image zoom 1.5. And both of these are shot in 4K. To me, right off the bat, I don't see too much of a difference. It's a little bit softer on the left, but if we zoom in, yeah. Now, when I look at his helmet, there I can really start to notice a difference. It's a little bit softer where I've digitally zoomed in. But to be honest, the clear image zoom is much sharper. Okay, and now let's compare the clear image zoom to the optical zoom. So in this case, I've taken the 23 millimeters and I've recorded at that with the 1.5 clear image zoom. And then after that, I zoomed in on the lens to 35 millimeters and zoomed out on the clear image zoom, essentially giving us the exact same focal length. So to my eye, it looks like the optical zoom image on the right is slightly softer, which is not what I expected at all. But I think it can be logically explained. Firstly, of course, it could be my fault, user error, I could have slightly missed focus and that's why it's a little bit softer. And secondly, it could be that because this is an optical zoom and I'm at 35 millimeters, the depth of field could be slightly shallower, which would give us a little bit of a softer image. To me, I would say they're both identical. I would not pick one of these shots over the other. All right, now if we look at all three together, you'll see the digital zoom on the left, clear image zoom in the middle, and the optical 35 millimeter on the right. You should technically be able to see an increase of image quality from left to right. But honestly, I don't see much of a difference. At least none that really concerns me. I do, however, notice as we zoom into the image, there is a big difference in noise. The digitally zoomed in image looks really noisy. The clear image zoom is slightly less, while the optical zoom is much smoother, much softer. The noise is not as loud and noticeable. So clearly, in this case, this makes me think that in low light situations, the optical zoom is going to be much better off. And using clear image zoom is going to introduce a bit of noise into your image. And that's just good to keep in mind. Right. So if the image quality difference between the clear image zoom and the optical zoom is too slight of a difference for you to notice, I know it is very slight for me. I have done a bunch of different tests and different scenarios so we can see side by side if there really is any difference. Let's have a look. All right, so for all these tests, the clear image zoom is on the left and the optical zoom is on the right. In this first example, we have my little cousin's tractor over here. I've shot this at 18 millimeters with a 2x zoom, so you will notice that it is slightly more cropped in than the version on the right, but that should not justify the difference I am seeing here. The image quality on the left is so much less. If you look at the exhaust pipe of this tractor, it is just two completely different objects. Okay, let's look at another example. Here we have a thing of salt. Again, on the left, the clear image zoom, you can see that it is much softer, especially where you see the name Marina. It is just so much softer. So far, this is not living up to the promise of maintaining the image quality and the resolution, because these HD shots don't look good. So let's have a look at the 4K and see if that's any better. Right off the bat, I don't notice any difference, especially in sharpness. I definitely do notice that the depth of field is different. Clearly on the left, the depth of field is much larger than on the right. You can particularly see when we zoom into the shot, the stone on the other side of the bunny is just a little bit more in focus. Other than that, I don't notice any difference. It is maybe slightly sharper on the right. Okay, let's look at another example. Okay, here we have a door sign. I'm not exactly sure what this says. I think it says I'll be back in 10 minutes. I don't notice any difference. And when we zoom in, I still barely notice a difference. I think it's slightly, it's slightly sharper on the right. That is for sure. I see in the texture of the paint on the sign, I can see that it's sharper. But honestly, if you gave me this footage on the left, I would not know that this was not the sharpest footage that you could get from this camera. This is really impressive. This is quite a big difference from the HD footage to the 4K footage. I would be more than happy to use the clear image zoom on the 4K, but on the HD, I'm not so sure. So in this example, I was shooting different things around my garden. Let's have a look at a more controlled test. Here we have my Andy Cine V-mount battery. So in the previous HD shots, we were looking at a 2x zoom factor. And yeah, for me, that was completely unusable. So what I've gone and done is I've redone the tests and I've shot them now with a 1.5x zoom factor, the same as the 4K. So this way it's much more controlled and we're going to be able to see if the difference in the HD footage is more comparable with the slight difference in the 4K footage. Okay, so immediately it is much better. Before you could really see the difference. Now you do have to look a little bit closely, but if you read the writing at the bottom of the battery, you can definitely see it's softer on the right. And when we zoom in, it just becomes so much more obvious that it's sharper on the right. And then we look at the 4K example. Again, I'm just utterly impressed. It is completely different. if you look at how soft the writing was at the bottom in the HD footage and how sharp it is now, how comparable it is now to the optical footage, I'm very impressed. To me, this is completely usable. This is an excellent result. Now we see all 4 shots together. Now you can see how the image quality improves from left to right. But again, the 4K footage, it looks the same to me. I think this is going to be a super practical feature, right? So in my opinion, I would say the clear image zoom is a very functional tool, especially in 4K. You can essentially turn any prime lens into a zoom lens, and you can extend the zoom range of any zoom lens. I think that's pretty cool. I would just maybe avoid using it in low light. As we saw earlier, the clear image zoom definitely introduces a lot more noise into the image. So I would just avoid using it in low light scenarios. And I also wouldn't use the 2x zoom in the HD, unless if you are in a desperate scenario and you have to get the shot, like you're filming a UFO or something, then yeah, I wouldn't bother using that. But the 4K 1.5 times is phenomenal. I think this is such an underrated feature and would definitely help you on any project, and is going to help me for sure. Right. Well, thank you for joining me on this clear image zoom adventure. I personally found this very informative and very interesting test. I hope that you've gained something from this as well. If you have, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. It really helps me out. And if you didn't gain anything from this, please let me know in the comments. I'd love to be able to improve and get your feedback for future test videos like this. All right, until then, cheers.